Yeah, so as Lisa said, today we're going to be going through some tips and tricks for Sumo Logic success, common issues that we see our customers have or ask questions about, and how they can quickly resolve those. So a few of the high level topics we'll be going through. I'm going to kick things off with dashboard panel troubleshooting, followed up by silent failure scenarios. So both of those topics are going to be around troubleshooting queries, whether that be a dashboard or an alert, and how you kind of walk through and work your way through those problems. And then Andrei is going to jump in with investigating missing data, the sec record index for Cloud SIM specifically, and then additional audit indexes, and go through some of the topics and uses of those indexes. Okay, so kicking things off with troubleshooting dashboard panels, there are a lot of reasons why a dashboard panel may not populate or may not work the way that you expect. Whether that be a dashboard that you've personally built, maybe someone on your team has shared something out with you, and you don't, you didn't build the underlying logic or scope of that dashboard, and it doesn't work for you. Or maybe you download an app from the app catalog, and when you go to open that dashboard, you see this kind of thing here in the middle where it says no data to display. So how do we work through that and bring back that data to make sure those panels work? So there's a few reasons or a few common reasons that we see that cause this to happen. A few of these are, or most commonly, it's going to be incorrectly defined scope. So that can be a few different things. On the right-hand side here, you'll see, if you weren't aware, anytime you download an app from the app catalog, you define the scope of that app. So that can be, source category, an index, any kind of metadata field that you would use to specify the scope of the dashboards that are contained within that app. And let's say you download this app, you set that scope, and then someone changes a source category or an index name or something like that down the road. That can change, or that can cause issues with your scope. Maybe there was a typo in this field when it was initially installed. So it's something you definitely want to be cognizant of and look out for. So the next common issue that we see is going to be related to time range issues, and we'll dig into this one a little bit deeper. Lots of different ways that time can cause issues with scheduled searches, alerts, and dashboards, and we'll walk through what some of those are here in a second. And another common issue is aggregations. So when you aggregate data, you're essentially manipulating the raw fields and the raw data and changing the output in some way, which can cause you to drop fields. It can cause data to be filtered in unexpected ways. So it's something just to be aware of and make sure that you have everything aligned for your aggregations. And then finally, this one we won't talk about too much, but just visualization settings. So when you go into a dashboard, let's say you are trying to visualize on a map. You want to plot geolocations, and you don't actually have latitude and longitude data. So the visualization that you're selecting would result in no results, right? So that's just something to be aware of. Make sure the output of your search matches the visualization that you've selected. Okay, so time range. What are the different ways that time can vary the results within a dashboard and can cause issues? One of the most common that I see and can be frustrating if you don't realize it is that there are two different time range selections on a dashboard. So there's going to be one for the individual panels and one from the dashboard as a whole. And a lot of dashboards, the individual panels will actually inherit the time range from the entire dashboard, but that's not always the case. So if you change, in this image on the right-hand side where it says negative 60 minutes, if you were to change that to 24 hours, but this panel below it didn't actually inherit that value, you could change that and refresh as many times as you'd like, and it's not going to change for the underlying panels, and you're going to wonder why you don't see results or why the results aren't changing. So something to be aware of, and make sure that each individual panel you're looking at has the respective time range that you need to get the results that you're looking for. Also, you just want to make sure that you're searching over a time period that has data. So various different sources may be coming in different batches. Maybe it's not a real-time source, or lots of reasons why data would come in at certain periods and not others. So you just want to make sure that the data you're searching against, or the time range you're searching against, actually has data to return. And then time zone settings can also be an issue. So if you weren't aware, you can go within your preferences and you can change your default time zone, which is going to translate the timestamps of results within Sumo to your relative time. If that time range is set to a place that you don't currently reside in, that can cause confusing results and maybe missing data when there's a discrepancy between those time ranges. And then a good quick fix is, always when I go into a dashboard, I'll just switch it to the last 24 hours. If I'm not seeing data, just broaden the scope, make sure that we have data at some period, and then we can tighten it back down if we need to. But just as a quick fix, yeah, let's just go in, change it to the last 24 hours, maybe even change it to the last three days, 7 days, something like that. Let's cast that wide net, make sure that if data is there, that it will return results, and then if so, we can once again scope it back down. Okay, aggregations. So there are lots of ways that aggregations can manipulate the data and cause maybe confusing results. Drop data, drop fields, and you may not understand where or why that's happening. Few common ones is going to be doing math operations on text fields. So if there's a mismatch between the type of data or the type of field you're looking at versus the operations you're trying to apply, that's going to give you no results. So if I try, and the example here is if I try to do a summation or summation of a text field, that's a mathematical equation on a text field. It's going to give you no results. So ultimately, your search is going to seem like it's failing because at that point it's trying to do that math on a text field, and then it's going to bring back no results from there. Similarly, you can group by fields that are non-existent. That may be because you've already dropped the field. That could be because of the output of a previous aggregation, maybe even a typo. But if you're trying to do some additional aggregation on a field that doesn't exist, you're going to get no results, and it'll make it seem like there's no data to actually be returned. Okay, so I'm going to jump into a couple dashboards and walk through the steps I would take to troubleshoot. Let's see. Okay, so this is a dashboard. It's a PaloAlto dashboard. Came from our app catalog. I downloaded this app, or maybe someone shared it with me, and I'm not getting results, right? So all of these coming back saying no data to display. First step, as I mentioned earlier, is going to be to expand that time range. So here you can see we've got a predetermined, pretty exact time this is searching across. Let's go ahead and expand that to 24 hours and make sure that we get results. And now we do have results come back for most of these panels. So in a lot of cases, that's going to be a quick, easy fix. But there is still one panel here that has, it looks like we are getting data, but it's mostly zeros, right? So the next step here would be to open this individual panel. So I can open in a log search. And then we can start to investigate from here. What I like to do first is take things back to the root, right? So we're looking at scope initially. So one aspect of scope is going to be that time range. The other is the metadata that you're searching against. So what I typically like to do is to comment out everything other than the first line. If you weren't aware, you can highlight this. You can hit Command // and it's going to comment all of that data out. And now we do see results, right? So that's good. It tells us that this underlying scope is correct. So this source category does have data coming in. We do have data with the keyword traffic, right? From here, I'm going to walk through kind of line by line and see where we're dropping that data. If there's any of these specific filters that are applied or parsing statements that are causing us to potentially drop data. So I'm going to add back in the CSV parsing. This one shouldn't be an issue, but we'll just verify that we still get results. And we do. And then from here, where statements are obviously going to be something that is very likely to drop data. So where type equals traffic, let's make sure that we actually do have traffic data, and that's the correct field. Looks like it is. So I know this can kind of be monotonous going line by line, but this is what I would typically do. Just line by line, let's see where the data stops coming in. Right. So now we're doing an evaluation of the source IP, looking for private source IPs. Looks like that is all still working correctly. And we can quickly go through this. We don't have to evaluate each one for very long. But we do still get data all the way up until our aggregate. So here, we'll want to take a double look, kind of a double check on all of these fields and make sure that we don't have a mismatch between data types. All of these fields exist, right? So before I run this search with this one uncommented, I want to look for these fields. So we've got a couple bytes fields, time slice, source IP. On my left-hand panel here, I can search for any of these fields. And let's just make sure they exist and there are actual values within them. So if I look at source IP, that's one of the things for grouping by. We do have that field and there are values here. So that's good. Time slice, we set that one earlier. That is also a field that we have access to, so that's good. And then let's look at the bytes fields. So there's a few of these. We have bytes, bytes received, bytes sent. Looks like these all have data. But you'll notice, and this is kind of a silly example, right? But this is super common. There's a typo here. So we have byte set. This is actually byte sent. So if I add that in back in, now I should get results. And I know that's a silly example, but I see it a lot. It's super common where you have just, you fat finger something, you have a typo, you don't understand why you're not bringing back results. And it's because you're trying to do some operation on a field that doesn't exist. So now this all works. We'll add in the final field and we should still get results here. Okay, so that's how I would typically troubleshoot, a panel that's giving me inconsistent results or no data. We were able to, pretty quickly identify that there's a typo here and fix that issue.
Hey, Austin,
So,
I have a question.
yeah.
So before you corrected that line 9, the data was showing up in like a table format. And then when
Mhm.
you corrected it, it showed up in this chart format or visual, I guess.
Yep.
Is there like a reason why that happened?
Yeah. So we're taking this is an aggregation command. So at this point, we're now taking the raw data and we're basically applying some math on top of it and grouping it just by these fields. So you'll actually see I can pivot this to a table view, but now all I get is these two fields because that's all that we have left is, or at least after line 10. All we're looking at is now source IP and bytes sent. And now that we have, basically pivoted down to just those couple fields, we're able to visualize it in different ways. And that goes back to the earlier conversation too. You want to make sure that this aligns with that this data aligns with the visualization you selected. Like if I try to do a scatter plot, it may give me some results, but it's obviously it's trying to map IP addresses here. Doesn't make a lot of sense. Right, so you want to make sure you have the ability to switch between all these different visualizations. You just want to make sure that it's something that makes sense for your data.
Great, thanks. So in the case of this panel and that dashboard, we wanted the visual that it gave us.
Mhm. Yep. Okay, I want to jump into one more example here within a dashboard. So this is one. I'm going to double check my times. Once again, I see lots of no datas here. All of these panels say 24 hours. So does the dashboard. So it looks like it is inheriting that time range. I'm going to go ahead and expand it to 7 days since it was already at 24 hours. These have all updated. So it is inheriting that value. But it looks like I'm still getting no data for most of these. And some of these are just saying no data to display at all. Let's open one up. And once again, I'm going to take all of this out, search it, see if I get data. I do. So we're going to kind of go through those same steps of trying to determine where that data was lost. And one thing that can be an issue, if you weren't aware, these JSON commands here. So all three of these first lines, they have no drop at the end, which is good. That's a best practice. But just as a heads up, if you're trying to parse out data using a JSON or a parse operator and you don't use no drop, the way that that's applied is it's actually going to filter your results. So it's going to look for events that match the parse statement that you've applied. And then anything that doesn't match it gets dropped. So that can be a common source for dropping data if no drop's not applied. But that shouldn't be the case for this one. Let's just run our searches, make sure that that's, yeah, nothing squirrely there.
Hey, Austin, we do have a question.
Okay.
If it's the right time to ask, or I can wait.
No, yeah, it's great. Let's see.
So in the previous example, you extracted the fields in the query. Is there a way to extract the fields in advance so I can just reference them without using parse CSV?
Yes, great question. So we'll just take the example in front of us. So there's lots of ways to parse it. Instead of parse CSV or CSV, JSON is another option, right? So if I knew I was going to search this particular data a lot and I didn't want to have to parse all of these fields each time, what I could do is I could copy this. And I'm going to come over here in a new tab under configuration. If you go to field extraction rules, I can open this up. I'm going to add a new rule. I would name this, apply it to some scope. So let's just say the source category that I'm searching. I'm just going to grab one at random here. But I can paste in this parse expression that is going to extract all of these fields. You can see some of these are new, some of them are fields we're using elsewhere, and then save that. And now at either ingest time or runtime, depending on how I save this, that parse statement is going to be applied to the scope that I set without explicitly having to add that to my search. So now I could come in, if I saved that and applied it to this source category, I could take out these 3 lines and reference these fields without actually parsing these. So great question.
Yes, they said thank you.
Cool. Okay. I'm going to kind of speed through this one a little bit. This one is doing a lookup command. And so there are times when you're getting no results, and maybe it's just because there are no matches, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be a bug or a typo or anything with the syntax. In this case, we're looking up malicious confidence from our out-of-the-box CrowdStrike threat intelligence feed. And we're able to say that based off of that threat intelligence feed, there is no malicious confidence for a lot of these. This search in line 9 is trying to filter where the malicious confidence is high. And before I add this in, if I just click on malicious confidence here, we can see it's actually just null for all of these. So we're comparing it against that threat intelligence feed, but we haven't identified anything with any malicious confidence. When I search this, I'm now filtering by something that doesn't exist anywhere in our logs, and we're going to get no results. So it doesn't always have to be, once again, something wrong. So sometimes the data just doesn't exist, and in this case, that's a good thing, right? We don't have anything that's matching those threat feeds. So that's a positive. All right, back to the slide deck. So the next topic I wanted to cover is silent failure scenarios. So this can be a couple different things. So one is maybe you have a known issue, but you didn't receive an alert. So you know something happened. You know when it happened. Maybe you were alerted that from a different tool, or somehow you know that this thing happened, but you didn't receive an alert from Sumo Logic, and you want to understand why. Right. So that's a common ask we get. We know this thing happened at this time, but we didn't see it. So why not? So we'll talk about why that may be and how to resolve that. And then the other piece to this is just unknown visibility gaps. So what are some common configuration issues or failure to adhere to best practices that can lead to unknown visibility gaps? And we'll talk about those as well. So once again, whether it's a dashboard, just a normal query, any alerts, timing is always something that I check first, because it can be it can be a big issue depending on how you're evaluating things. And one of those, especially for scheduled searches, is going to be the comparison of how frequently you are evaluating a search versus the time window that you're searching it against. So on the right-hand side, we have a screenshot here of a scheduled search that's been configured. Excuse me. And you can see the run frequency is set to hourly, and the time range is actually set to every 15 minutes. So what that's saying is this thing is going to run once an hour, and it's going to search 15 minutes worth of data. So every hour you're missing 45 minutes worth of data. So that could be a huge visibility gap if you had it configured in this way. And you can actually go the opposite direction if you had these things swapped and get more noise than you would typically expect, or than that you would like to see. So we've got just some easy examples here, but a 5-minute window on a 15-minute schedule would result in missed events, because you're searching 5 minutes worth of data every 15 minutes. You're missing 10 minutes of data that's never being searched. And then the flip side of that is, if you had a 1-hour window with a 5-minute schedule, you're going to get duplicate alerts, because every 5 minutes you're searching the last 1 hour worth of data. So you're searching that same bucket of data multiple times before it phases out of that hour. The other piece of this is data ingestion delays, right? So there's lots of reasons why data may not hit the system completely real time. Maybe it is being pulled via API, and that API is rate restricted or rate limited in some way. Maybe it's coming from a system that pushes the data once a day or once an hour. Whatever the case may be, you need to have your alerts adjusted and basically take into account those delays or that frequency of the data coming in. Another thing is, maybe there's just, based off of network bandwidth or others, it could be just a slight delay. Maybe it's 5 minutes. It takes 5 minutes for all of the data to get processed and hit Sumo. If you're searching on a 5-minute window and you're searching the last 5 minutes of data, it takes 7 minutes for the data to actually hit Sumo. That data is never going to be evaluated unless you search based off of receipt time instead of message time, and we'll talk about how to do that. But those are two of the common issues that I see with timing as it relates to alerts. All right, so what are some other configuration gotchas that you want to be aware of? One of those is going to be your aggregate or your trigger mismatch. So similar to making sure when you do an aggregate that you're not doing math on text fields. We'll talk about how that's configured within a monitor, but you also want to make sure that the trigger condition you've specified in an alert makes sense for the output of the query that is being alerted on. Aggregates, once again, can cause you to drop fields. So you're not going to be able to trigger off of a field that no longer exists. This is also something you may want to pay attention to when it comes to alerts, if those additional fields have context that you need, right? So maybe you're going to trigger off of the count field, but you also would like to keep around that description field. So an analyst actually has that description whenever they come in to respond to an alert. And then the final piece is muting schedules. So we give you the ability within Sumo to actually mute your alerts. For example, let's say there's something that you don't care about if it happens Monday through Friday. But if this same behavior happens over the weekend, you want to be alerted of that. So maybe for this alert, you set up a muting schedule that says Monday through Friday, mute this alert. Over the weekend, let's actually alert and escalate. If that's incorrectly applied to an alert, that could be one reason why something happened. You know what happened, but you didn't get alerted to that. So it's another thing that you want to be aware of. Okay, so let's jump back in. Okay, so we're going to take this example. This is unauthorized AWS API request. If I search this, you'll see this search works. It brings back, let me expand the time range. Should bring back results. Okay, so yeah, this brings back results. This is something that we want to set up an alert for. So anytime this particular action takes place, we want to be notified. And there's two different ways that we can set this up. One is with a scheduled search. So if let's say I save this, I'm going to edit and schedule this search. The first thing you're going to see is scheduling searches for non-aggregates is not allowed in auto parse mode. So if I want to search or say this is a scheduled search, I need to add in some aggregate, right? And maybe that's just a count. But once again, be aware that if I add in this count, we drop all the other fields, right? So if all I want to do is be notified when this unauthorized request happens, and I don't care about any of the additional context, that's great. I can add in this count, set up the scheduled search. But maybe I also want to see the user's name and the event name, source device, IP, right? If I want all of that additional information, I'm going to add that into my count operator. So I could say count by user, source device IP, and the bit name. Now this looks good, has the context I need. I can respond to this appropriately. I can now come in, let's resave and edit. So I can now schedule this, and this is where I set that run frequency. So by default, it's at never, but if I want to turn this into an alert, I'm going to say, maybe every 15 minutes. And this is where I just want to coordinate between the frequency and the time range. So I don't want to search 24 hours worth of data every 15 minutes. It's going to cause duplicate alerts. It's just not needed, right? I'm just searching the same data multiple times. So if I want to run this every 15 minutes, let's look at the last 15 minutes worth of data. Then I can save this. So that's the first way that I would schedule this search as an alert. The second would be to create a monitor. So I'm going to take this core search that I started with, I come to alerts and monitors, add a new monitor, add in this search, press enter to execute. And you'll see when you set up a monitor, if you've never done this before, it gives you a few different options on how you trigger this monitor. So not just whenever this thing returns results, but maybe you want to do some evaluation on a specific field. And by default, it's grabbing this user ID field. It thinks that's relevant. Maybe it is or isn't for the way I want this to function. But you can see down at the bottom under trigger type, it's saying trigger a critical alert when the result is greater than 0 within a 5-minute window. And the historical trend here is giving us no data, right? And the reason that is is because this is a string value. So it's looking at a user ID, which is a string, and you're trying to say when this string is greater than 0, and it doesn't compute. Once again, there's a mismatch between those types of fields. So I want to change this to something that's going to make more sense. So maybe that's if I scroll through all of the field options that I have here, maybe that is, let me just type it in here. Returned row count. So this is a good option to use. So this is going to say, based off just how many results I get, how many rows of results did I get? That is now a numerical value, and I can say greater than 0, and that should make sense. And we'll give this a second to populate. And yeah, so now you can see the historical trend that this would have fired if I use this value instead. You can also, like we did on the last one, you could also just update your search to say count by user ID, source device IP. Oops. And event name. Re-execute, and maybe I want to use count instead. And then this now makes sense. I just wanted to walk through that. I've seen it for a lot of our customers can be kind of confusing on making sense between the trigger condition and or sorry, the trigger value versus the trigger condition here. You need to make sure there's not a mismatch or a disparity there. Okay, so to wrap up my portion here for troubleshooting, I can leave you with just a few key takeaways. The first is going to be start simple. So if something's not working the way that you think it should, let's first look at time range. Let's look at the scope. That's going to be the metadata that you're searching across. Does the data actually exist within the time range that I'm searching? Once I've ruled that out, then we can start stepping through looking at the where statements, looking at our filters and aggregates, checking for typos, and can hopefully quickly resolve the issue. So start simple, look at the scope, and then get into a more detailed process from there. All right, I'm going to stop sharing and pass it over to Andrei.
That was awesome, Austin. Thank you.
Hey everybody. Thanks, Austin. Appreciate it. And we'll continue on this theme. Let me turn my stuff on. Right. Let's share. All right, cool. Can everybody see my screen with the 3 tabs there?
Yep.
All right, awesome. And away we go. So my name is Andrei Fomenko. I am a technical account engineer. They used to call us technical account managers, and now we're engineers. Got a background in security. Spent about 22 years in tech and 15 in security. And my story was that prior to being here at Sumo for about 4 years, I was a customer. Before that, I worked security manager, implementing controls and dealing with frameworks. As a consultant as well. So that's my background. Contact me here at Fomenko@sumologic.com. So today we're going to continue on the theme that Austin had with us. I've got 2 environments up here. One of them's our play sales engineering environment. Another one's a sandbox, kind of be switching back and forth. As we can see, we'll do it live. So hopefully the demo gods are kind to us today. We'll hit 3 topics, reasonably quickly here. So we'll investigate some missing data, some approaches at looking at that missed data. We'll take a look at Sec Record and Cloud SIEM, which is similar to missing data, but as it makes its way down the pipeline and it wants to make its way to the sim. That's somewhere where we could have an issue. So we take a look at that. And then we'll take a look at some built-in indexes, caveats. Some of these need to be turned on. Most people have them turned on, but those are usually faster and potentially more useful than looking at the raw data. So 1 minute refresher here. So here we got the Sumo Logic Cloud in the middle up here. We've got the stuff on the left, which are installed collectors. So those are effectively agents. They can bring things in via local files and host metrics. So those are agents that are installed, and I'll use one of those as an example as well on a MacBook. We've got some syslog that can be brought in from other devices that are on a network that can access those agents. So you can expose a port and send syslog to it, and also pick up remote files from that agent. Then we can also do containers and applications and open telemetry and stuff like that. So that's that part on the left, and part on the right is what we have hosted collectors. Those are effectively HTTPS endpoints that are exposed for devices to send to those HTTP endpoints, or they are API based where we're reaching out to some service and pulling that data down. So investigating missing data. So we'll take a look now in the environment, and we'll take a look at two approaches. So the first approach is taking a look at the data itself. So somehow it's come to your attention that the data is missing or maybe missing. It has been there for a while. We're going to take a look at querying the actual messages themselves. And then we'll take a look at using that data volume index, which is a built-in index with Sumo, and that's going to be faster. And then the other approach is looking for error messages. And as a foreshadow, a monitor will be coming up, and off we go. So now we are going to be in the sandbox environment. We're going to take a look at collection. And here you're going to see that we've got my MacBook, and the MacBook appears to be unhappy. And you can see that the MacBook is in an error state. And we'll get more into kind of what this error means, but the MacBook's unhappy. We'll take a look at a monitor that we'll come back to, and we'll just quickly see that there is a missing data. In fact, against that MacBook, we'll see, taking a look at the alerts themselves, we'll see that our MacBook is not happy and has been dead since yesterday about 6 o'clock and change when I was configuring this demo. So kind of a foreshadow here. So going back to collection. So let's take a look at this MacBook, and we'll have a look right here under the source category. That's usually the good place to go for that. You could also do it under the collector, which would be right here. But let's take a look at the source category. When you're looking back 15 minutes, and what we can use is message time and receipt time. Message time is the time that's inside the timestamp itself. The receipt time is the time that we received it and stamped it on ingress. So let's take a look at that. Just to make sure that we don't have any timestamp issues, we're going to switch that to receipt time. Take a look last 15 minutes. I think everybody can agree this is dead. Let's go back 24 hours on receipt time. We'll take a look at that. And you can see this isn't very interesting stuff. This is from like private Verilog. It's showing some devices, the Wi-Fi and stuff coming up and down. Taking a look at the message time and the receipt time, you can see they're only off by about 4 seconds, right? So that's pretty good latency. There's not, or in terms of delay, not much coming in. But you can see the last time that we saw this thing was yesterday at 6:30. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this thing come alive on my side, and I will return to it in a moment. I think we can all agree that this thing is not here. Now, another way you can do it is, let's say I wanted to go back the last 4 hours starting from now. There's not going to be anything there, but you can do what's called a count as we saw from Austin, there's nothing there. Do a compare time shift. We'll do 4 hours and we'll do 6 more. That should give us another 20 hours behind that 4 for 24. And you should see that, okay, last 4 hours, nothing. 4 hours before that, nothing. 4 hours before that, 12 hours, nothing. And then before that, we had quite a few messages and quite a few messages before that. So we'll come back to this in a moment, but we'll see if it comes back, given that we've fixed this now on the collector side. So that's how you take a look at it in the raw messages, but let's take a look at it using something called data volume. So let's see if I can grab that. We're probably in the other environment. We'll grab it out of the other environment. So here's another way to test it. Instead of looking at the raw messages themselves, we'll now open up a log search, drop this in, and let's take a look at what's actually been coming in for the last, we'll do the same thing, 4 hours, and we'll do compare time shift, 4 hours, 6. And you can see that the performance of this is going to be much higher. We're doing actually a few things here, so I'll explain it quickly. So we got the data volume index, right? Those are essentially just the deltas in terms of bytes coming in. So we're not looking at the raw messages, we're just looking by source category. And there's a lot of different ways to look at that. We'll take a look in terms of the volume. We can look at the source category metadata. We can look at collector, source name, source host, stuff like that. Right now, we're looking at source category. We're looking down, or we're parsing it out, and then we're trying to count it as gigabytes. So we're interested in knowing how many gigabytes are coming in for what. Now, you can see here that we have some AWS, we have some internal sources. Those have been good and steady coming in. But you can see that as we saw before, now we're calculating the bytes by the size field. We'll get back to that as well. We're seeing that hasn't been here for quite a while. And it's actually quite a bit faster. Let's get rid of total for a moment, and this will be a little cleaner. So you can see for some reason this thing went dead. Now, if I wanted to filter out on that, that would be quite easy. All I have to do is I could go where source category equals installed MacBook. And you can see that this is very fast and effective. This is a very small data set, but when you're doing this against like millions of messages coming from some large firehose, this is much faster. And we can already see that our messages have started coming back because I turned it back on. So, and let's take a look at, so we'll kind of keep that hanging for a moment. Now, the next thing we'll take a look at is error messages. So if we go back to collection, we'll actually see that this thing has now come healthy as opposed to before it was failed. Well, how do we know that it's healthy or it's not healthy? Well, what this actually does is it looks at the error messages. So here we're filtering on one particular source, and we call that health, the Sumo Logic system events. And let's go back 24 hours and we can kind of look at these error messages. And you can see here, I was doing things to bring it back up and bring it down, bring it back up and all that. But here you can see it went from unhealthy, where it died yesterday around 7 p.m. And today it returned to healthy at 9:43. So this is sometimes also a valid way to look at these. However, there will be some instances where you don't get an error message back and the thing just dies. So for example, if you have a, let's say you've got an installed collector and you got a syslog port exposed and you got, let's say, a switch that's sending things to that installed collector. Let's say it's on the same subnet. For some reason, that switch just died, got fried. It's not sending anything anymore. Well, the collector is still going to be okay, but you're not going to have any more data coming in. So in that case, this isn't going to be particularly useful. So two ways to look at it, kind of recommend both. We'll pause for questions, but I assume if anybody has some, they'll be relayed to us.
Yes, there are
So
no questions at this time.
awesome. Okay, cool. So taking a look at another different kind of collector. Remember yesterday, or not yesterday, a moment ago, we were talking about the installed collector, but now we're talking about a hosted collector. Hosted collector is when it's being sent to us or we're pulling it. In this case, I'm doing two test things and they're both not working. This is what's called a cloud-to-cloud connector. It's when we go out and pull the data via API. But I've done something kind of goofy here. So we'll take a look at Mimecast. Here I've put in a client ID that doesn't exist with a secret that doesn't exist. And so when we take a look at the errors that are being returned here, you can see that they're going to be slightly different, but they're going to be, let's take a look at this, but they're going to be not too far apart. So taking a look at the one that is the Mimecast one, see, we're returning 401, right? So 401 is typically authentication failure. By far the most common error that we're going to see is that for some reason, either that key's been rotated or has expired, or somebody has goofed the input of the credentials like I did, and this thing has failed. And you can see here, it's kind of cool because it looks like they're actually telling us that the client identifier is bad, which it is, because I gave it some random string and the credentials are also bad. So this is one of those where you do want to monitor those error messages. Let's take a look at Netscope. So Netscope, they use it a little bit differently when we configure that cloud-to-cloud connection. So we give them a tenant ID. Salesforce does a similar thing. So you can see I gave it a tenant ID of this is not a tenant.ghostscope.com. And there's no tenant that's called that. In fact, it looks like we tried to do a lookup on DNS port 53 and we failed to look it up completely. So we've now returned an error 500, right, which is a server error. And this has also failed similarly. No data there. There never was, but we can kind of see two different error codes returned either by the third party or returned by us. In this case, couldn't even look it up. So the third, because this doesn't even exist. But we're still going to return those error codes into the error message. Let's see. So we'll take a look now, expand on what we know, and go look at monitors. So let's have a look at the monitors.
And Andrei, just a time check here. We probably
Yeah.
have time for you to finish this particular part.
That's probably fine. Yeah, so taking a look at monitors, I think we've kind of already seen what Austin showed us here. So there's a recommended way to configure these monitors. We'll provide you the link inside of whatever the meta stuff is that's attached to this video. But you can see here that we're taking a look at the data volume and we're trying to see whether the data is there or not. This is very performant. And you can see that you can configure it. We're configuring it like Austin was on a return row count. There's one alert per collector. This is actually very, very helpful because traditionally, if you had many, many collectors or many, many source categories, you would configure them on the basis of one per each. So, and then you would have to maintain that. Here, the good thing is you don't have to configure all those monitors. You just configure one and it says one alert per collector. If you press enter, it will kind of return what's there. And then we can configure missing data and then alert when missing data shows up within 10 minutes, evaluate every minute. So that's one way to do it. And then the other way to do it is going to be this source error. And you can see what we're looking at here is those system events. And we're looking for that unhealthy system event that we've seen for those three sources: the MacBook, the two cloud-to-cloud connections.